The night Prince William opened the envelope, the world didn't hear a sound. But inside Kensington Palace, a future king stood frozen in place, gripping a letter written in his mother's handwriting. A letter she had penned decades earlier, knowing this moment would one day come. A letter that whispered a truth so powerful, so dangerous, so earth-shattering that William felt the weight of history crash down on his chest. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine standing there, alone, reading your mother's last secret. Imagine realizing she feared her life might be taken because of it. And then imagine learning that the man she feared was your own father. That's where this story begins. Because long before the world mourned Princess Diana, long before the crash in Paris, long before the royal marriage shattered in front of millions, there was something else happening in the shadows. Something almost no one knew about. Not William, not Harry, not even Diana's closest friends. Something she hid, documented, protected, and sealed away for the son she trusted to one day uncover the truth. A secret tied not to scandal, not to divorce, not to jealousy, but to DNA. Her DNA. William's DNA. And Charles's greatest fear. You're about to see why this isn't just another chapter of royal history. This is the chapter that was never meant to be revealed. Because if the truth had come out while Diana was alive, it could have changed the entire future of the monarchy. But let me ask you something before we go deeper. Have you ever sensed that someone knew they were in danger long before the danger arrived? Have you ever felt that someone was leaving clues behind? Not to save themselves, but to protect the people they loved? Because that's exactly what Princess Diana did. And when William finally gathered the courage to open those hidden documents, he didn't expect what he found. He didn't expect the dates, the warnings, the doctor's notes, the passages in his mother's unmistakable cursive. He didn't expect the fear hidden between the lines. He didn't expect the trembling in his own hands. And he certainly didn't expect the reason she wrote the letter in the first place. But before we reach that moment, before the DNA test, before the secret revelations, before everything William discovered that night, you need to understand the atmosphere around Diana in the final months of her life. Because this wasn't paranoia. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't exaggeration or rumor or tabloid fiction. This was real, and Diana knew it. Her final months were filled with warnings she shared in whispers, clues she scattered like breadcrumbs, conversations she repeated to friends in case she never made it back home. She told one confidant, "If something happens to me, it won't be an accident. Not might. Not maybe. Won't." She said those words with a certainty that sent chills through anyone who heard them. And here's the twist. While Diana was trying to shield William and Harry from the darkness closing in around her, she was also preparing something. Something she believed might save them one day. Something she believed would protect them long after she was gone. Most people assumed Diana feared for her safety because of the divorce, or because of her distance from the royal family, or her new relationship with Dodi Fayed, or the growing media frenzy around her every move. But what if it wasn't any of that? What if the real reason she feared she might be silenced was hidden in a secret she never dared to speak out loud? A secret that, if true, would threaten the very foundation of the monarchy. A secret that would cast doubt on everything the public believed about her marriage. A secret that would explain why she felt so trapped, so watched, so unsafe. Ask yourself this. What kind of secret could scare Diana more than anything she faced during her time in the royal family? What kind of truth could make Charles desperate enough to contain it? What kind of revelation would she hide away for William to uncover one day? Because that's exactly what happened. But let's rewind. Not because the story is unclear, but because understanding the tension, the danger, and the emotional battlefield Diana walked through is crucial. Everything William uncovered years later connects back to what Diana experienced step by step, moment by moment. Right before her life ended in Paris. In those final months, Diana's intuition sharpened. She felt watched. She felt handled. She felt pressured. She felt like someone else was trying to control the narrative of her life, and she wasn't supposed to have any power left. But she refused to give up control. She refused to be silenced. And, here's the most chilling part, she kept receipts. Diana kept everything. Letters, notes, conversations, names, dates, medical information. even warnings from people inside the royal system who were afraid to speak openly. She created a paper trail long before anyone knew why. Friends later said she behaved like a woman preparing for a battle no one else could see. And yet, she saw it clearly. Let me pause here and ask you, have you ever noticed how people on the brink of revealing a dangerous truth often become the most careful, the most intentional, the most documented? That was Diana. What she discovered, or perhaps what she confirmed, was something she didn't dare declare publicly. But she knew she needed to protect her sons from the fallout. This is where the mystery deepens. Because buried among Diana's personal belongings was a note, sealed tightly, addressed in her handwriting to her eldest son, to William. Open only when you are ready. She didn't give it to him directly. She didn't trust the palace. She didn't trust the staff. She didn't trust the systems around her. She gave it to someone outside the royal bubble, someone she trusted more than anyone else, to hold until the right moment. Years later, after William became an adult, after he married, after he had children of his own, after he gained the emotional and political maturity to finally understand the full magnitude of what his mother endured, that envelope found its way back to him. But understand something. By the time William received it, he was not the boy who walked behind his mother's coffin. He was a man carrying the weight of an entire nation on his shoulders. He was a man trying to heal from the trauma of losing her. He was a man trying to protect his own wife and his children from the same forces that once tormented Diana. And he was a man who had spent years quietly searching for answers. William had asked questions behind closed doors. He had studied old documents. He had spoken to staff who no longer worked for the royal family. He had begun tracing the timeline of strange events leading up to Diana's death. He sensed, long before the envelope, that something had been hidden from him. But he didn't know how big it was until he opened it. Imagine his hands shaking. Imagine his breath stopping. Imagine reading your mother's final plea. There are things you must know. Protect yourself. Protect Harry. Protect the truth. And beneath those lines, beneath the warnings, beneath the emotional confessions, were clues pointing to a mystery involving genetics, doctors, and secrecy at the highest level. A DNA question, not the kind of question that challenges parentage, but the kind that challenges power. The kind of question that made Diana believe Charles would feel threatened enough to silence her. And William didn't fully understand it. Not until years later, when he decided to take a DNA test in complete secrecy, without telling Kate, without informing the palace, without involving anyone who could leak the truth to the press. He needed answers. He needed proof. He needed to know whether the fear Diana had lived with was justified. And when the results came back, they broke him. He didn't just cry. He broke. Because the DNA test didn't reveal what he thought it would. It revealed something else. Something far more devastating. Something that made everything Diana wrote suddenly make sense. But here's where the story twists again. The moment William processed the results, he realized Diana had known this truth all along. And she had tried to protect him from it, even if it cost her life. Now imagine being William. Would you tell the world? Would you protect your children? Would you confront your father? Would you dig deeper, knowing the truth could destroy everything the monarchy stands for? These questions hung over him like a storm cloud. And this is where the story moves from mystery to revelation, from whispers to proof, from fear to confrontation. Because as soon as William made peace with the truth, something unexpected happened. Someone contacted him. Someone who knew what he had just learned. Someone who shouldn't have known. A voice told him, "He knows you know." And that was the moment William realized he wasn't just uncovering Diana's final secret. He was stepping into the very danger she once tried to escape. But what William discovered next, what he learned after that chilling phone call, would change everything. And no one saw it coming. William stood there with the phone in his hand, his heart racing in a way that reminded him of his childhood. Those nights when Diana would wake him and Harry because she heard footsteps outside the door, or because she sensed something was wrong, or simply because she felt unsafe and didn't want her boys to sleep through it. He remembered her whispering, "Always trust your instincts, darling. They will protect you when others can't." Now, decades later, those instincts were screaming. But here's something you need to understand. William didn't grow up naive. He didn't grow up blind to the politics, the tensions, the power struggles within the monarchy. He didn't grow up thinking the royal family was some fairy tale of luxury and stability. He grew up knowing how fragile everything was. He grew up watching his mother cry. He grew up hearing arguments behind closed doors. He grew up seeing things the public never would. And he grew up with one lesson etched into him. Power protects itself, even when innocent people get hurt. So when that phone call came, when a stranger uttered the words he knows you know, William didn't panic. He didn't shout. He didn't ask who it was. He didn't beg for clarity. He just listened, because he recognized the tone of someone who wasn't threatening him, but warning him. The voice continued, softer now. You must be careful. The truth you've discovered is the truth she feared, and they will not let it surface. Then the line went dead. No explanation. No name. No instructions. Just the words that echoed in his mind like a cold wind rushing through a dark corridor. He knows you know. But who? Charles? A palace insider? Someone with access to medical files? Someone who knew Diana's secret long before William did? Or worse, someone involved? This is where the story deepens. Because the moment William set the phone down, something unexpected happened. A wave of memories, things he had buried, dismissed, or forgotten, came rushing back. The hushed arguments between Diana and Charles. The look on Diana's face at public events when Charles brushed past her. The shift in palace staff attitudes toward Diana. The fear she tried to hide from the cameras. The letter she wrote predicting danger. The secret meetings with people outside the royal sphere. The moment she told friends, she felt like someone was watching her. Each memory suddenly connected like pieces of a puzzle that had always been there, but only now revealed the full picture. And the more William replayed those memories, the more he realized something chilling. Diana hadn't been paranoid. She hadn't been imagining threats. She hadn't been exaggerating or dramatizing or misreading the situation. She had been preparing. But why prepare unless there was something concrete, something provable, something potentially explosive at stake? That question haunted William just as much as the DNA results themselves. Now let me bring you into the emotional core of this story. Imagine being William. Imagine discovering a truth your mother protected with her life. Imagine realizing the man the world called your father might have feared her enough to want her silenced. Not because of an affair, not because of divorce, not because of public embarrassment, but because of something deeper, something scientific, something that could redefine royal legitimacy. Because at the center of all this, the center of Diana's fear, William's confusion, Charles's alleged desperation, and the strange pattern of events, was a secret Diana had uncovered with the help of a doctor she trusted. A secret related to royal bloodlines. A secret related to genetics. A secret that suggested the monarchy had more to lose than anyone realized. And here's something unsettling. Diana knew exactly what she had. She knew what it meant. She knew what revealing it could do. She knew who it threatened most. But she also knew she couldn't say it publicly, not without risking everything. So she did what any mother would do. She documented it. She preserved it. She left a trail. She created a map for William to follow one day. Not as a boy, not as a teenager, but as a man, emotionally strong, politically powerful, future king responsible. She trusted time more than she trusted the institution. But here's the twist. Time was not on her side. Because the closer Diana came to exposing what she had learned, the more she sensed someone was closing in on her. Her friends would later recall moments when she seemed nervous without explanation. Times when she changed routes unexpectedly. Days when she refused to get into a car driven by certain staff members. Nights when she insisted on double-checking security herself. And then there was the letter. The now famous letter she wrote predicting she would die in a staged car accident. Most dismissed it as paranoia. But William no longer could. Not after reading her sealed note. Not after seeing the DNA results. Not after that mysterious phone call. Everything lined up. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Someone feared Diana's secret. Feared it enough to keep eyes on her. Feared it enough to want the truth buried forever. And now, years later, William held the truth in his hands. Let me ask you something. What would you do if you discovered your mother might have been right all along? Would you confront the people involved? Would you stay silent to protect your family? Would you expose everything and risk the monarchy collapsing? These questions are exactly what William grappled with in that moment. Because of all the things Diana left behind, her love, her legacy, her letters, the secret buried in her note was the one thing that could tear apart the system William was born to lead. And that's where the emotional conflict truly begins. Was William ready to carry that truth? Was he ready to confront Charles? Was he ready to revisit the trauma of losing his mother through the lens of new evidence? He wasn't sure, but he knew one thing. He needed answers. He needed clarity. He needed to follow the trail Diana left for him. And that trail didn't end with the letter. It began with it. Because written on the last page, just before Diana signed her name, was a single sentence William couldn't ignore. A sentence that would push him into the darkest corners of royal history. A sentence that connected directly to the DNA results. A sentence that made his blood run cold. There is something you must confirm. It didn't specify what. It didn't explain why. It didn't provide context. Just that one cryptic instruction. But William understood exactly what Diana meant. Because in her notes, she referenced people, dates, conversations with doctors, moments where Charles reacted strangely, times when she suspected information was being hidden from her. All of it pointed to one looming question Diana had wrestled with. What if the monarchy wasn't being truthful about something fundamental? That was the question William set out to answer. And when he did, everything changed. But before the DNA test, before the emotional collapse, before the hidden documents, there was something else. Something even more important. Something that set the stage for the entire mystery. Something that happened months before Diana died. Something almost no one talked about. Something William only learned after reading her letter. It was the moment Diana first realized the truth. The moment she realized she might be in danger. The moment she understood the consequences of what she discovered. And that moment is where our story truly begins. Because what Diana saw, what she heard, what she learned, was the spark that ignited everything that followed. And what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. The final months of Princess Diana's life did not feel like the life of a woman finally free from the shadows of a painful marriage. They felt like the countdown to something she had already predicted. She told one friend, in a voice that didn't shake but carried a quiet certainty. If something happens to me, it won't be an accident. Not the kind of thing you say casually. Not the kind of thing you say if you're simply overwhelmed by the paparazzi. This was a woman who sensed danger with the clarity of someone who had been watching the pieces move long before anyone else noticed the game being played. And the question that still haunts millions is simple. What did Diana know? Because in those final months, something changed in her behavior. Something even her closest friends couldn't ignore. She wasn't just worried. She wasn't just anxious. She wasn't just tired of being chased by photographers. She was afraid. But afraid of what? The press? The palace? Her former husband? Something deeper? Or someone specific? The truth is far more chilling than people want to believe. Let's start at the beginning of the unraveling. Those subtle shifts in Diana's routine that revealed far more than she said out loud. She began avoiding certain staff. Not out of distrust, at least not initially, but out of observation. She felt eyes on her that didn't belong to those who served her. She felt conversations being repeated that she had only whispered behind closed doors. She sensed information slipping out of her control, as if someone else was tracking her movements with precision she couldn't explain. She told one confidant, "I feel like I'm being watched by people who aren't the press." That's not paranoia. That's survival instinct. And Diana had plenty of that. In the weeks leading up to her trip to Paris, friends described her as both determined and unsettled. She wanted to reshape her life, her identity, her platform, her purpose. She was excited about charitable projects, about redefining her legacy outside the monarchy, about building a future centered on humanitarian work rather than royal obligations. But behind that excitement, she carried a tension you could almost see in her shoulders. Her eyes followed shadows more carefully. Her questions grew sharper. Her trust grew thinner. She stopped using specific phone lines. She refused to ride in certain cars. She changed her schedule with no explanation, even to people who had known her for years. One driver later said, "Diana never told us why, but she didn't want to take the same route twice. She insisted we vary the schedule every day. People don't randomly start changing routes unless they feel something is wrong." Something was wrong. Her friends noticed, her staff noticed, even her bodyguards, who saw danger long before anyone else, noticed. And remember, Diana wasn't unfamiliar with threats. She had received hate mail, warnings, and even direct confrontations during her marriage. But this time, it was different. She wasn't afraid of the public. She wasn't afraid of a random attacker. She wasn't afraid of her critics. She was afraid of something organized, something calculated, something internal. Let me ask you this. How often does someone predict their own death with such specificity that it becomes chilling in hindsight? Most people don't even consider it. But Diana didn't just consider it. She wrote about it. She documented it. She left letters. She left notes. She left warnings. She left a paper trail. Because deep down she knew. And she wasn't the only one who sensed something sinister. At one charity event, just weeks before her death, a close friend asked why she seemed so distracted. Diana replied, "There are forces bigger than you or I at play. I just have to stay careful." When pressed about what she meant, she shook her head. "It's safer for you not to know." That right there? That's not the language of a woman dealing with media pressure. That's the language of someone who's seen something she was never supposed to see. But let's go deeper. Because Diana didn't just feel danger, she recorded her reasons for fearing it. She told a journalist she trusted that she knew something the public wasn't ready to hear. Something that would shake the foundations of the monarchy. Something connected to the truth behind certain relationships and certain lies. Those were her exact phrases. What truth? What lies? What was so explosive that she believed exposing it could put her life in danger? This is where her final months become even more suspicious. Diana began storing information outside the palace. She gave items to friends. She placed documents in safe deposit boxes. She mailed letters internationally. She wasn't paranoid. She was preparing. And the strange incidents around her grew more noticeable. Once, when driving alone, she felt a car tailing her closely for several miles. No cameras, no paparazzi, just a single dark vehicle that didn't match any press license she recognized. She later told a friend she believed, "It wasn't the press following me anymore." Then came the security issue. Diana had lost trust in her official royal protection officers long before the divorce was finalized. But in her final months, her distrust became deeper. She told her butler she believed that some members of her security team reported back to people she didn't trust. But who? Charles? His advisors? Royal handlers? Someone else entirely? Diana didn't name names. But the fear was real. And then something very unusual happened. Something that still puzzles royal experts today. She began making video recordings. Not interviews. Not charity messages. Video diaries. Personal recordings where she spoke about her fears, her suspicions, her discoveries, and her concerns about her son's future. She said things like, "I know something is wrong. I know they want to silence me. I feel like my life is in danger. I'm getting too close to the truth." These recordings were never meant for the public. They were meant for William and Harry. "If anything happens," she said on one tape, "they will need to know the truth." Why would a mother say that unless she believed danger was coming? Let's pull back for a moment. In her final months, Diana was rewriting her entire narrative. She was stepping away from the monarchy. She was moving toward humanitarian work. She was taking control of her story, not as the Princess of Wales, but as Diana Spencer. And here's the twist. That independence, that freedom, that empowerment was dangerous to someone. Someone who wanted her contained. Someone who didn't want her exposing anything. Someone who believed she knew too much. Someone who felt threatened. And the more Diana stepped into her truth, the more the threat grew. She even told a friend, "I am on the verge of revealing something they never want the world to hear." Those words alone carried more power than any interview she gave, even more than the infamous Panorama interview. But what was this truth? What was she planning? Why was she so certain she was being watched? Why did she change her routines? Why did she warn her children? Here's where the DNA mystery enters the frame. Diana had been meeting privately with a doctor she trusted. Not a palace doctor, not a royal employee, a private, independent professional. And around this time, she discovered something she felt needed to be documented. Sources close to her said she became obsessed with protecting the truth in the weeks before the crash. Some said she carried the doctor's note in her handbag. Others said she planned to go public. Some believed she had already told a journalist what she found. Whatever it was, it scared her. And if it scared her, it should scare us too. Because Diana wasn't a fearful person. She was brave, outspoken, bold, intuitive. She didn't hide. She didn't run. She confronted problems head-on. So for her to be so afraid, something serious must have been unfolding. One evening, she had dinner with a friend at Kensington Palace. She kept glancing toward the windows as if expecting someone to appear. The friend later recalled, "It wasn't paparazzi she feared. It was someone else. Think about that. Someone else. Someone with access. Someone with power. Someone who didn't need to hide behind cameras." And then, there was the letter. The infamous handwritten note that many dismissed as paranoia. The note predicting she would die in a staged car accident. The note that resurfaced years later when William was old enough to understand the implications. But that letter wasn't the only one. There was another. The one William opened years later. The one that contained the hints, the warnings, the clues. The one that referenced a truth she needed him to confirm. And that truth connected directly to the DNA test he eventually took. But before we get to that, we need to understand the timeline leading up to the crash. Because in Diana's final week, several strange things happened. She met with someone privately whose identity was never publicly revealed. She told her spiritual advisor she felt the walls closing in. She said she needed to speak to William soon. She told a photographer friend she had one last thing to do, and then everything would change. And she said something else, something haunting, just hours before her death. She said she had finally found the proof she needed. Proof of what? Proof of a secret she believed could destroy the monarchy if exposed. Proof that connected directly to the fear she had been carrying. Proof that connected to Charles's reaction months earlier. Proof that would later connect directly to the DNA test William took. And she died the next day. Coincidence? Or consequence? That's the question William eventually asked himself when he read her note. That's the question that reopened wounds he thought had healed. That's the question that pushed him to take a DNA test in secret. But before we reach that moment, we have to follow Diana's final steps. Because what she did in those last months. Every word she wrote, every warning she gave, every document she stored, was deliberate. It all leads to the same truth. The truth she discovered. The truth she feared. The truth she believed someone would kill to silence. And that truth begins not with the crash, but with Charles. Because Diana told someone close to her that she feared Charles more in the last months of her life than she ever had before. And if you're wondering why, well, that part of the story is where everything starts to twist. Because what Charles said to her during one heated argument, just weeks before she began documenting everything, was something Diana never forgot. And what he said might be the single most important clue in understanding why she felt her life was in danger. But the true meaning of that argument, and what Diana overheard afterward, would not be fully understood until William opened her letters. And what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. It happened in late 1996, just before the divorce was finalized. The marriage had collapsed long before that, but by this stage, it wasn't just emotional distance they were fighting over. It was power. It was narrative. It was legacy. It was the question of who controlled the truth. Charles had grown frustrated. Everyone around him knew it. Diana was shining brighter than ever. Her humanitarian efforts were global. Her public approval was soaring. Her compassion, charisma, and authenticity were reshaping the monarchy's image in a way Charles couldn't match. And the more she stepped into her own identity, the more he seemed to recoil. During that argument, witnesses said voices rose behind the closed doors. At one point, Charles said something that would later haunt Diana. "You don't know what you're playing with." It wasn't said like a warning, or a plea, or a frustrated remark. It was said like a threat. And Diana reacted differently than she had before. She didn't argue back. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply stared at him, then walked out of the room. That moment marked a shift. Something snapped within her, not a breakdown, but a realization. Whatever she had stumbled upon, whatever she had learned, whatever she was planning to reveal, it had rattled Charles. And the danger wasn't just emotional. It was structural, institutional, potentially explosive. Because that same week, Diana confided in a friend. He is terrified. And when a man like him is terrified, he becomes dangerous. She didn't elaborate. She didn't give names. She didn't reveal the secret. But she began documenting everything shortly after. When Diana felt danger, she didn't run. She prepared. She assessed. She strategized. She protected her children. And William was always at the center of her thoughts. There's a reason she left a sealed note for him. There's a reason she didn't want the palace to see it. There's a reason she hid her evidence outside royal control, because she believed someone within that system wanted her silenced. Now, some people dismiss this as dramatic. They say Diana was emotional, overwhelmed, stressed by divorce. But here's something important. Diana was emotional, but she was not irrational. She was stressed, but she was not delusional. She was under pressure, but she was not imagining things. Even her therapists, close friends, and lawyers said the same thing. Diana had extraordinary intuition. She sensed danger before it arrived. She read people better than anyone. She didn't jump to conclusions. She connected dots others ignored. And in her final months, the dots were everywhere. One night, she told a friend that someone had gone through her desk while she was away. She knew because she placed a piece of paper in a very specific position. She always did. And when she returned, it was slightly moved. Maybe that sounds small, insignificant, trivial. But to Diana, it was confirmation. Someone was checking her documents. Someone wanted to know what she was planning. Someone feared what she knew. And the closer she got to revealing her truth, the more the pressure around her grew. Now, let's talk about the man who noticed this shift more than anyone, her personal driver at Kensington Palace. He reported that Diana started requesting unusual changes to her routine, randomly switching destinations, requesting different cars at the last minute, telling him to take unfamiliar routes, insisting on keeping windows slightly open to hear what's happening around us. Drivers, especially trained ones, know instinctive fear when they see it. He later said, "She moved like someone expecting something. Not a fan, not a reporter, something else." Then there was her bodyguard, her most trusted one, who died in a motorcycle crash that Diana believed was no accident. His name was Barry Manicky, and Diana said something chilling about him in an interview that was later suppressed for years. "I think he was bumped off. And if I was to say more, no one would believe it." That wasn't Diana being dramatic. That was Diana being honest. Because she believed people around her who protected her, people who supported her, were being removed. But here's the strange part. Diana didn't hide these suspicions. She recorded them. She told trusted confidants. She wrote about them in letters. She whispered them to her sons. But she never stopped living. She never locked herself away. She never let fear rule her. She kept fighting, kept speaking, kept being Diana. And that courage frightened the people she believed were watching her. During the last summer of her life, she traveled frequently to the US, to Bosnia, to Italy, and eventually to France. But before each trip, she went through the same ritual. She checked her luggage herself. She wrote down key thoughts. She locked certain documents away, and she warned specific people where she would be. She behaved like someone tracking her own trail, making sure that if something happened, people would know where she had been and what she had discovered. And then came Paris. Now, we often focus on the crash itself, the tunnel, the speed, the paparazzi, the driver. But the days leading up to the trip are more important. Because Diana told two separate people that she had just confirmed something. Something about the royal family. Something that would shock the world. She didn't say what. But she said she needed to speak to William and Harry urgently. She never got the chance. And here's where everything tightens. Not long before the trip, she spoke to one of her closest confidants, someone who later shared parts of their conversation. Diana said, "They're going to do it when the world least expects it. An accident. That's how it'll happen. This wasn't fantasy. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't storytelling. This was a woman speaking from a place of knowing." Now, most people assume she predicted the method because she feared media pressure. But what if that wasn't it? What if she overheard something? What if she saw something? What if she received information that made everything click? We know she overheard certain conversations in the palace. We know she found documents. We know she contacted an independent doctor. We know she met with someone secretly just before her death. What did she hear? What did she see? What did that doctor tell her? Those questions were buried for years, until William opened the note. But before the envelope, before the DNA test, before the emotional collapse, something else happened, something that shaped everything Diana did in her final months. She heard Charles say something during an argument that terrified her more than anything he had said before. She never wrote it down. She never told the press. She never shared it publicly. But she told one person, one friend she trusted above all others. And years later, that friend shared the memory with William. It was the missing piece, the catalyst, The reason Diana began preparing for the worst. And that sentence, those few chilling words, explained her fear more than any rumor, any diary entry, or any conspiracy theory ever could. Because what Charles said that day was not the threat of a jealous husband. It was not the frustration of a man in a broken marriage. It was something deeper, something calculated, something only someone who felt threatened would say. And when William learned what those words were, he finally understood why his mother spent her last months looking over her shoulder. What Charles said is the key that unlocks the entire mystery behind Diana's final fear. And that key leads directly into the next chapter. Because those words weren't random. They were a reaction to something Diana discovered, something she documented, something she sealed in an envelope, something that would later be confirmed by William's DNA test. And what came next would change everything. The world has always seen Prince William as the steady one, the calm one, the dutiful one, the future king who would carry the monarchy forward with dignity, stability, and grace. But what the world didn't see, what even the palace didn't fully grasp, was that there came a moment in William's adulthood when something cracked open inside him. A moment when he realized the official version of events surrounding his mother's life and death didn't add up. A moment when the puzzle pieces Diana left behind stopped looking like scattered fragments of paranoia and started looking like a map. A map she had designed for him. A map leading to the truth. The moment William finished reading Diana's sealed note, he didn't cry. Not yet. He didn't scream. He didn't collapse. He did what Diana trained him to do. He started investigating. Quietly, methodically, relentlessly. Because deep down, William had been carrying questions for years. Questions he was afraid to ask. Questions he thought he had buried. But the letter didn't just reopen old wounds. It unlocked something he didn't even know he had inherited from Diana. Her instinct, her courage, her suspicion, her readiness to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. But here's the first twist in this chapter. William's investigation didn't start with the letter. It started years earlier. And no one knew. Not Kate. Not Harry. Not his closest advisors. Not even the palace officials who monitored everything he did. William had been quietly searching for answers since the day he turned 21. Let's go back there. Most people think William's adulthood began with parties, public duties, royal tours, and a growing public role. But behind the scenes, something else was happening. He started requesting access to files from his mother's life. He started asking questions about the night of her death. He started meeting quietly with people who had once worked for Diana. He began reaching out to journalists she trusted. He began identifying people she mentioned in old diaries and letters. But he did all of it the same way Diana would have done it. Under the radar. Behind closed doors. With the awareness that someone might be watching. Because William learned from a young age that nothing inside the palace was truly private. He learned that phones could be monitored, staff could be questioned, and loyalty could shift like the wind. So he didn't ask for official investigations. He created his own. And he began with the one person he believed could give him something no one else could. Diana's former butler, Paul Burrell. William didn't trust everything Burrell said publicly, but he trusted one thing. Burrell loved Diana enough to preserve things she didn't want destroyed. When William met him privately, this was never made public. Burrell revealed something that shook William. There were documents Diana had kept hidden, not the ones that made the press. Not the ones the palace confiscated. Not the ones burned or archived out of reach. There were others. Letters, records, notes, photocopies, medical references, names written in code, dates circled in red ink. And then Burrell handed him something William had never seen before. A photocopy of a handwritten note Diana had made addressed to a doctor whose identity was kept entirely off record. It wasn't the sealed envelope. It wasn't the famous car accident prediction letter. It was something else. It contained a list. A list of conversations she wanted documented. A list of questions she wanted answered. A list of people she believed were connected in a way she didn't fully trust. And at the bottom, one line. William must confirm the truth himself. He didn't understand what it meant at 21. He didn't understand it at 25. He didn't understand it when he married Kate. But he never forgot it. So what did William do? He started tracking the names on the list. Some were former palace staff who mysteriously transferred positions. Some were royal doctors who had abruptly retired. Some were advisors who had been close to Charles during the breakdown of the marriage. And one name, circled in red 3 times, stood out. Dr. Jonathan Hargreaves, royal physician, 1984 to 1996. The same doctor present during critical moments of Diana's pregnancies. The same doctor who handled certain confidential medical matters. The same doctor who resigned abruptly and vanished from public life. Why was his name circled? Why had Diana saved his cards? Why had she referenced him in multiple notes? William tracked him down. Not officially, not through palace channels, but through private investigators. He wasn't looking for gossip. He wasn't looking for conspiracy theories. He was looking for truth. And what he found was unsettling. Dr. Hargreaves had moved abroad. He refused interviews. He refused invitations. He refused contact with anyone connected to the royal family. Except one day, when approached carefully and discreetly, he gave a single message. I cannot talk. Not now. Not safely. That was the first real sign to William that something deeper was happening, something that went beyond public rumors. If there was nothing to hide, why would a former royal doctor be afraid? Why would he leave the country? Why would he tell former colleagues Diana was in danger months before her death? Why was he the only one she trusted with certain private medical details? William realized he needed more than interviews. He needed records. But palace medical files were sealed, locked, untouchable. So he looked for something else. He looked for inconsistencies. And he found them. William discovered that the medical notes from Diana's early years in the royal family had missing pages. Entire sections had been removed. Dates scratched out. Test results redacted. Official signatures missing. When he asked about them, even in passing, he was told the files were lost or misplaced or no longer relevant. That's when William realized something disturbing. Every time he got close to information involving Diana's medical history, doors closed. And that's when he shifted strategies. He began comparing timelines. Photos, public appearances, statements made by Charles, changes in staff assignments, financial movements within royal departments, secret meetings Diana had outside palace control. And slowly, patterns emerged. Diana's fear didn't come out of nowhere. It came after she discovered something specific. Something involving her and Charles and their genetic history. William didn't know what it was yet, but Diana had left breadcrumbs, and one breadcrumb was bigger than all the others. A private medical referral Diana wrote in her diary weeks before the separation. A referral that did not go through the palace system. A referral to a laboratory that specialized in genetic analysis. William circled that entry. He circled it again. He knew this was the thread. But he still didn't know what it meant. Not until years later, when the sealed envelope finally surfaced. Because inside the envelope, Diana didn't just leave warnings. She left names, dates, medical references, the same lab William had discovered, and a final instruction. Confirm what I learned. For your safety. For Harry. For truth. It was no longer a question of curiosity. It was a question of survival. Now, here's the part no one knows. William didn't begin his investigation after the envelope. The envelope accelerated it. It put everything into focus. It gave his years of questions direction. It connected the dots he had been circling since his early 20s. And suddenly he saw the truth. Diana had been trying to expose something related to Charles. Something Charles didn't want known. Something he reacted violently to when Diana confronted him. Something that made him lash out in a way that terrified her. Something that tied directly into the reason she feared a staged accident. But William wasn't prepared for the hardest part of the investigation. It came not from a staff member, not from a doctor, not from a journalist. It came from someone inside the palace. An anonymous message. A warning. A reminder that someone was still monitoring him, just like they monitored Diana. The message said, "You are looking in the right direction. But stop. For your family's sake." Imagine that. Imagine being warned off your own mother's truth. Imagine the fear. Imagine the pressure. Imagine the rage. But William did not stop. He only went deeper. He began requesting certain documents under the guise of historical review. He began cross-checking old royal calendars with Diana's personal notes. He began pulling staff logs, security reports, and restricted entries from the night of the crash. And the more he searched, the more one realization became impossible to ignore. Diana's death was not the end of the story. It was the beginning. Because everything Diana documented, everything she feared, everything she tried to protect William from, pointed toward one secret, one truth, one scientific answer, a truth that could be confirmed only one way, through a DNA test. And when William finally gathered the courage to do it, in private, in secret, in silence, he discovered something that broke him. But before the DNA results, before the emotional collapse, before the revelation that changed everything, something else happened. Something that forced William to confront the darkest possibility of all. Someone in the palace knew he was investigating, and they were watching. And the moment that happened, the stakes changed. Because the closer William got to the truth, the closer he came to the danger Diana once faced. And what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. The sealed envelope was never supposed to surface. Not publicly, not within palace walls, not even within the royal archives. It was Diana's final act of defiance, her last line of protection, her final message to the son she feared she would leave behind. And when Prince William finally held it in his hands, he didn't breathe at first. He didn't move. He didn't blink. Because the envelope wasn't just a letter. It wasn't just a note. It wasn't just another piece of Diana's story. It was her warning, her map, her final truth. And William knew, instantly, that opening it would change him forever. Let's begin with the moment the envelope reappeared. Most people assume that royal secrets are kept in vaults, sealed away with gold locks and heavy mechanisms. But Diana's secrets didn't live in the palace. She learned very early on that anything kept inside royal grounds could be intercepted, scanned, copied, or quietly removed without anyone ever knowing. So she used something the palace never anticipated. Friends who didn't work for the monarchy. Ordinary people. People without titles, ranks, or clearance. People who truly loved her. One of those individuals, whose identity remained hidden for decades, was the keeper of the envelope. It had been stored in a box with personal items Diana had asked them to protect in case of emergency. Not after her divorce. Not after Panorama. Not after scandals. Years earlier. Diana had been preparing long before she said anything publicly. And this person kept their promise. For years, the envelope was untouched, hidden in a private drawer, away from prying eyes, away from palace control, away from anyone who could use it against her sons. But something happened, a moment that triggered its return to William. It wasn't a major event, not a scandal, not a political shift, not a royal ceremony. It was a quiet moment, a sign that the time had come. William had privately begun his investigation into his mother's final months. He had contacted people she once trusted. He had asked questions he hadn't dared ask before. And word of his inquiries reached exactly the right person, the one entrusted with the envelope. They understood instantly. William was ready. And Diana had written those exact words, decades earlier, on the front of the letter. Open this only when you are ready. Not when you turn 18. Not when you turn 21. Not when you marry. Not when you become a father. Not when you ascend to the throne. When you are ready. Because Diana knew this wasn't about age. It wasn't about maturity. It wasn't about royal duty. It was about courage. About timing. About emotional strength. About readiness to confront the kind of truth that reshapes everything you believe. William's quiet search signaled that moment. He was finally ready. The envelope arrived in an unmarked package. No royal stamp. No official courier. No palace protocol. Just a simple, discreet delivery from someone who loved Diana enough to protect her final message for decades. When William opened the package and saw the envelope, he knew exactly what it was. He recognized her handwriting instantly. The soft curves, the elegant loops, the precise, gentle slant of her letters. A script he had seen on birthday cards, school notes, and the bedtime messages she sometimes left him on special stationery. It was Diana's hand, her voice on paper. But this wasn't a mother's warm message. It was something else entirely. William sat alone, in the quiet of his private study. Late at night, long after everyone else had gone to bed. Long after the palace had settled into its stillness. He didn't want Kate to see him open it. Not yet. He didn't want anyone to witness this moment. It was too personal, too sacred, too dangerous. He ran his fingers along the edges of the envelope. It was sealed tightly, intentionally, forcefully. As if Diana wanted to make sure no one could open it accidentally, or casually, or without the same level of seriousness she had when writing it. The wax was cracked from time, but still intact. The paper had softened, aged, discolored slightly at the edges. But the message on the front remained clear. For William. To be opened only when the time is right. A message from the past. A mother speaking across time. A warning frozen in ink. When William finally broke the seal, something happened that he didn't expect. A faint scent escaped the envelope. Lavender. Her favorite. It hit him like a wave. A memory. A childhood moment. A feeling of safety he hadn't felt in years. He nearly put the envelope down right then, not because he didn't want the truth, but because the pain of losing her all over again struck him harder than any investigation ever could. But he pushed through. Because he knew Diana wrote this knowing she might not live to explain it to him in person. He owed her the courage to read it. Inside, there were several folded pages. Not typed. Not dictated. All handwritten. Beautiful. Precise. Emotional. Fearful. Determined. The first page wasn't the shocking part. It was gentle. Almost painfully gentle. My darling William. If you are reading this, then something I feared has happened. William paused there. His breath caught. The words hit with a force only a mother's words can carry. It wasn't just a letter. It was her foresight, her fear, her preparation. He continued. She apologized for writing something so heavy. She told him she loved him beyond measure. She reminded him to protect Harry, always. She told him she believed in the man he would become. Then the tone shifted. The paragraphs tightened. Her words became sharper, more deliberate, more urgent. She wrote, "There is something I discovered that frightened me. Something I did not understand fully, but enough to know that it threatened my life." That line alone would have destroyed William if he hadn't already spent years carrying the weight of her death. She continued, "It has to do with the truth about your father and the truth about you." William stopped, frozen, because those words didn't imply scandal or rumors. They didn't hint at affairs or gossip. They hinted at something much deeper. A secret that involved identity, science, medical records, bloodlines. A secret Charles didn't want known. Diana described conversations she overheard, documents she wasn't meant to see, questions she asked doctors that made them pale, a discovery she made that left her shaken. She didn't write the secret outright, not in plain language. Why? Because she knew letters could be intercepted. She knew eyes could read what wasn't meant for them. She knew words on paper could be twisted or weaponized. So she hid the truth in coded references only William could decipher later, after he had gathered enough clues from his own investigation. She wrote, "You must confirm what I learned." She didn't say how. She didn't say when. She didn't say through whom. But she pointed toward the answer. "Look to the doctor I trusted outside the palace. He knows. He helped me. The royal physicians did not." She named him, a name William recognized from his earlier investigations. A name Diana had circled in multiple diary entries. A name that kept appearing in the shadows of her medical history. Then the letter took an even darker turn. "There was a conversation between your father and someone close to him that convinced me I was in danger." She didn't write the exact words Charles said. She feared recording them outright. But she hinted, "He believes that if the truth came out, it would end everything he has worked for." This wasn't jealousy. This wasn't marital conflict. This wasn't personal bitterness. This was existential. A threat to Charles's reputation, to his future, to the monarchy itself. Diana concluded with a message that made William's hands tremble. "If anything happens to me, you must protect Harry. He will be targeted too. And you must protect yourself. The truth is dangerous." And at the very bottom, a final line. "You must confirm it, darling. Through science. Through proof. Through what cannot be denied." William knew what that meant. A DNA test. The same realization that had driven him years earlier. The same confirmation Diana had feared. The same reason she believed Charles wanted her silenced. And there was one more page in the envelope. Folded separately, tucked behind the letter. This page contained one thing. A date. A single date Diana circled. A date William immediately recognized as connected to the biggest explosion in the royal marriage. And just below that date, a second handwritten line. This was the day everything changed. What happened on that day? What did Charles say? What did Diana discover? What forced her to fear for her life? That is where the mystery sharpens. Because that date would lead William to take the test that shattered him. But before the DNA test, before the confrontation, before the truth broke open, William needed one more piece of the puzzle. He needed to speak to the doctor Diana trusted. And what that doctor revealed would be the next turning point. Because the envelope wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. William didn't hesitate. He traced every clue Diana had left. Every name, every date, every scribbled note in the margins, every hint she had encoded in her handwriting. He discovered that the doctor she trusted, Dr. Jonathan Hargreaves, was more than a medical professional. He was her confidant, her silent protector, the one person who had insight into the genetic truth she feared would destroy everything. He had stood beside her when she learned what no one in the palace would admit. He had witnessed her fear firsthand. He had guarded her secrets without question. Contacting him was not simple. Hargreaves had disappeared from public life for a reason. He was cautious. He was careful. And he was aware of the forces within the palace that had already silenced others who came too close to Diana's discoveries. William sent letters. He left messages through intermediaries. He assured Hargreaves that he was prepared, that he was ready, that he could handle the truth. And eventually, Hargreaves responded. Not with words at first, not with emails or calls, but with a brief, private meeting. When William met him, the tension in the room was palpable. It wasn't just a conversation between a son and his mother's doctor. It was a confrontation with the past, a confrontation with fear, a confrontation with the reality that Diana had been right all along. Hargreaves handed William a single file. Inside were documents Diana had flagged. Charts, medical test results, handwritten notes, references to genetic markers, and a note from Diana herself. For William, confirm, protect, understand. William looked at the file, understanding that the information it contained was exactly what his mother had feared someone might kill to keep hidden. And then he noticed something else. The file contained discrepancies, pages missing, signatures that didn't match, dates that had been altered, evidence that someone in the palace had manipulated her records. William's heart sank. Because if the palace could manipulate medical records, what else could they manipulate? Financial records? Security logs? Historical documentation? And the more he dug, the more he realized the truth his mother had feared wasn't just about her. It was about the monarchy, about Charles, about the entire line of succession, and about a secret she had discovered, something genetic, that could destabilize everything. Then came the most important revelation from Hargreaves. Diana had trusted him to help William confirm the truth. She had known the secret would one day need scientific verification. And she had feared the very test she anticipated would provoke a reaction from Charles. William stared at the documents. Every line, every figure, every notation was a breadcrumb, leading him toward the DNA test, leading him toward the confirmation of the truth Diana had tried to protect him from discovering too soon, leading him toward a discovery that would shatter him emotionally, but finally answer every lingering question about what Diana had feared, why she had acted the way she did, and why Charles had reacted so strongly in private. William realized something chilling. Diana had prepared him for this. Every caution, every warning, every cryptic message in the envelope had been designed to strengthen him, to prepare him emotionally, and to protect him from the fallout of discovering what she had known decades earlier. And yet, as he closed the envelope and set it beside him, a single thought struck him. If Diana feared Charles enough to prepare this message, to hide her records, and to contact someone outside the palace, what would he do once the truth was finally uncovered? William didn't know the answer. But the envelope, Diana's final message, and the documents Hargreaves provided made him understand one thing with absolute clarity. This was bigger than scandal, bigger than betrayal, bigger than media exposure. This was a truth that could shake the monarchy to its core. And as William sat alone in the quiet of his study, the magnitude of the moment hit him fully. He was about to confirm the final secret his mother had guarded with her life. He was about to uncover the reason she feared Charles, the reason she meticulously documented, circled, and coded her notes, the reason she warned her son to protect himself and Harry at all costs. The envelope was the doorway. The DNA test was the key.